This set of experiences was during my time in Okinawa from 2009 to 2011. I was stationed there on Kadena Air Base and lived in an on-base dormitory. There were 3 major occurrences while I stayed in that room. The first of the 3 was the least jarring. My room was occupied by a pair of young men who'd passed away, presumably during the US occupation way back. They never really bothered anything as they tended to just mill about the room. At night, they usually settled into the chair by the window and on the foot of the bed. I'd never really felt anything negative from them, just felt like company. The next one, however, there was a woman who'd wander the dorm. Usually she came to drunk guys and gave them pleasant dreams for the sake of keeping it PG. One evening, I'd had a bit of alcohol myself, but no more than enough to be tipsy. I felt soft, feminine hands running down my back, a feeling that I've had years prior that, like then, I refused. Apparently, she didn't take kindly to my dismissal because after that, she appeared more frequently. I would be playing games on my laptop and my room would chill noticeably during the summer. It couldn't have been the AC since that came from the inner hallway. It was some time after her visitations that another spirit started coming around. I tied these 2 together due to them always appearing together and from what a friend told me later. This presence was another male. Both he and the woman were native spirits. He would appear around the same time as her and they would stand opposite one another. His presence was accompanied by the air feeling much hotter than before. I'd end up half hot and half cold in the middle of their stare down. One evening, I lay down to sleep for the night. Shortly after I laid down, I found that I could not move. I felt a large, rough hand on my head and another on my side before hearing the sheets creak as I was pressed into the bed. Of course, I panicked mentally and started muttering in my head, "Get out," and trying to shake myself. It took some time before I wiggled slightly and uttered, "Get." As soon as I said the phrase aloud, I was able to move freely and sprung out of bed. At this time, the light was on, but there was seething shadows where the ceiling met the walls. I could actually see them writhing like small tentacles outward. There was an overwhelming presence bearing down on me, so I contacted a friend of mine I'd just been talking to on TeamSpeak. She came on and I explained the situation. She strongly advised that I did a banishing ritual to get rid of the offending spirit, or that she said that she could. Not wanting to make things worse by messing any part of it up, I asked her to do so. She said to put her on the speakers and she read the words. No sooner did she finish, she suddenly disconnected abruptly mid-sentence as things calmed down on my end. When she came back, a woman's voice screamed from behind her. She said that she dealt with the spirit, although it made an attempt at her. That was when she explained what she had gotten from the spirit. The woman in life had gotten involved with the wrong people and then the wrong forces. They owned her, as she put it, and she came that night to get me for scorning her. The man that I had kicked out, she mentioned him without prior knowledge. She said that he had come to protect me from her. He had taken his own life because of her and became bound to her and the earth by custom. I spoke to the man, apologizing for shunting him out as I did in panic. I thanked him for trying to protect me and said that I would honor his passing. As I finished speaking, 3 lights blinked in the air above my bed. The shape of a triangle, first the top point, then down to the right, and lastly across to the left. After that night, I never saw nor felt either of them ever again. Speaking with my mother, she told me that the lights were his acceptance of the apologies, his thanks for my honoring him, and his goodbye as he moved on. The last one certainly startled me, but was altogether peaceful. I'm not sure if the happenings were connected, but they may have been. I was driving back to the dorm from the flight line that night when I saw a shadow blot out my back passenger window. It crept up toward the front passenger window before latching onto the side mirror. I couldn't see so much as I knew that it was swirling in around that window before it slid off entirely. That night, in the early morning, I'd woken up with the feeling that I was being watched. As soon as I opened my eyes, I was met with the white eyes of a small local girl staring unblinking into my own. I started with a jump before I felt that she was harmless. I shook my head and told her that she could stay as long as she didn't watch me sleep anymore. She wandered away to look around the room as I fell back asleep. Later on, I always kept a bucket next to my computer chair as a small table. I didn't use it as a table then because a small part of me said to not do so. So as I was playing my game, waiting for a call from my mother, I'd feel something gently graze my leg at a steady rhythm. When my mother called, during our talking, she'd ask me who my friend was. I was confused for a moment before she said, "The little girl sitting next to you." She also said that she enjoyed watching me play my games. She told me that she'd gone blind and passed away due to an old childhood illness a ways back. She'd been drawn to me as, whatever it might have been, I was the first person she'd seen in ages. After that, I'd more frequently leave the bucket uncluttered while I played video games or explained when I couldn't. My other two members of the room that I mentioned were unbothered by her, so I didn't mind her either. So it was me and three spirits in that small room. As I was writing these out, I recalled a couple of details. My friend had said that the woman had guided something into the room that night, and it had left before I'd gotten her help. The other was that my two resident spirits from prior were nowhere to be found during the incident. Not that I suspect them to have helped, nor expected them to, just a curiosity. I now live in a 2-story farmhouse located in a countryside. I have a small chicken coop in my backyard and just recently paired 2 white Chinese silk chickens, and they have 6 chicks that are all healthy. I thought my slow life had just begun until I found out that there is a creepy closet in the attic. The story began on a stormy night. I was alone in my house with my cat, Alishani. Alishani is a playful gray female cat with short hair and a pair of beautiful green eyes. She liked to hide in the old closet in the attic and always plays hide and seek. I was creeped out by the closet since the first day I saw it. Usually I will just bait out Alishani with her favorite toy, Mr. Rat, and just carry her away from the closet. I never used that closet until today. During that stormy night, Alishani was again playing hide and seek, and as usual, she hid in the closet upstairs in the attic. I was tired of the routine of having to bait her out of the closet and carrying her away. So this time, I just decided to wait for her to come out. Alishani popped her little head out of the slightly opened closet and looked at me, doing that face of, "Why are you not doing your routine?" I baited her from the old sofa with Mr. Rat and planned to hug her when she reached out for the toy. As expected, Alishani came running, but she stopped as if someone else was behind her. I looked around and thought that my back was getting cold. Alishani walked towards me with caution and was staring at the wall behind me as if someone was standing there. I turned around and saw nothing but a wall, obviously. Alishani walked back and ran to my bed. I was creeped out, so I followed her to my bed, thinking to sleep the night away. In the middle of the night, I heard some noise in the backyard and thought that it was some wild raccoon that could have snuck into the chicken coop. I ran out into the yard and, with my spring-loaded air rifle, I switched on the light of the chicken coop. The hen was sitting on her nest, protecting the fluffy chicks. The male was on top of the roof, alert, staring down at me curiously. I saw no trace of raccoons or whatsoever. I switched off the light and turned my back at the closed door of the chicken coop. I suddenly felt that my back was cold again, as if the rainwater has dripped onto my back. I looked back and obviously just saw the orange door of the chicken coop in the dark and nothing else. I set up my air rifle and turned on the laser on the way back to my house just in case there was a beast hiding somewhere. I kept feeling that someone was looking at me from a distance. I hurried back into the house and saw that Alicia Nee was awake, but she was peeking up the stairs to the attic. I immediately thought of that creepy closet. I put my gun back from where it should have been so that I will not shoot Alicia Nee or anything in the house accidentally. I switched on the lights and headed into the attic. Alicia Nee was curious of my actions and she looked at me with her ears straight up. The attic was quiet and dark since it is used as a storage. I could only hear the rainwater dripping outside the window. I see the closet from the reflections of the lights downstairs. I softly opened the closet with my finger. The closet slammed shut by itself suddenly. I carried Alicia Nee as I ran out and went straight to my garage. Poor Alicia Nee was so frightened that she curled up in my arms like a furball. I think it was the first time in my life that I have ever ran away from a closet. To this day, I have no clue what it was, but the closet is still in the same spot at the attic of my house. I own a motorcycle with a sidecar. You know, the famous Russian ones. I bought it quite cheap, but since it was quite old, restarting the thing took nearly my lifelong working payment. I was lucky that the mechanic guy was volunteering to give me old, usable parts to make my motorcycle work again. Me and the mechanic guy became friends. It has been 2 years now, and since I was quite into the spiritual world, we used to talk and bring up some spooky stories, big or real. Anyways, enough of the long intro. So me and that mechanic guy planned for a winter sidecar ride event at the area where I am. There were people from around Japan who would love to experience the breezy winter ride. We went along the countryside in the morning. It was quiet, but with our sidecar, the place was vibrating with the sound of the motors. Some kids heading to their school were looking at us with the "what the" kind of look. I found it so funny to see the look of surprise on their face. We were at a point where during the World War, the Chinese and Korean laborers worked and died and had their cemeteries. I don't know why, but where we live it's called the Chinese Cemetery. If any of you know the place, keep it for yourself because I don't think it's a good place to go to. You'll see why. I have the habit of drinking mate, and I like to drink it in the traditional way and not tea bags. My friend and I were having a little rest near the Chinese cemetery while I was sipping on my mate. I felt some weight on my back and the bombilla, the metal straw for drinking mate, started to become a little foggy. I thought maybe it was the temperature difference, but it was not that. My mate cup was those stainless ones, and I had a traveling pot for hot water. The cup never fogged up like that, even on the coldest days. I heard a few people around me whispering in Asian languages, not in Japanese because I would have noticed that they were whispering by now. They were in a language that I've never heard before, so I asked my friend. He shook his head and asked me why. Since it was early in the morning and it was sunny but very snowy, he did not suspect that it was something else other than people. He told me that it could have been some tourists. Now that I think of it, there were not any tourists but only us. Only in the sidecar that we were driving in. And the two of us spoke and understood Japanese. I thought the whispering was strange, but on top of that, there was also the weight on my back and the fog. Fortunately, we left the area and drove off. Nothing else happened after that. I was driving my sidecar motor, heading back home after a far trip down south. I rested in a camping field. Seldom I will camp overnight, but that night I had to camp overnight since the engine of my motorbike was overheating. I got some sweet corn from the owner of the field and had them for dinner. The night was cool, and I set up my tent and stayed inside for the night. It became windy, and I had tightened all the flapping parts on my tent. I heard some footsteps and thought that it was the field owner patrolling. But then I heard some clanging noises that sounded like someone wearing heavy boots, carrying some metallic items, stomping on the ground heavily. I lit my torch and shined around but saw nothing. I went back to my tent. I was a little worried and so I went out again. Unfortunately, I could not set up a campfire since it was too windy, so I just shined my torch around the field. This time, from a distance, I kind of saw a man standing, facing my tent. I shined my torch towards him, hoping to see who he was, but the man had disappeared before I even tried to shine the torch at him. I thought that maybe it was my imagination, so I returned into my tent. The next morning, while I was packing up my tent, the owner came to me and asked if I had a good night. I told him about the clanging noises and the footsteps. The owner then raised his brows and nodded in a curious way and brought me to where I saw that person standing. Please note that I did not tell the owner about seeing the man in the distance and disappearing when I tried to shine the flashlight. The place that we were on is an unmarked cemetery where the owner and the realtors of the land found some human bones remaining. They thought it was an incident of some unknown case, so they called the cops and found that the bones are at least buried 200 years ago. The owner told me that I'm not the only person hearing and seeing things on this campsite. Some historians said that around the 19th century, this field was used as a battleground of war between the shogunate force and the imperial force. Many young men lost their life fighting for their lords. Do you think this is eerie or what? I am the guy who still has a life at what once was a forbidden place. Yes, the chanting is still going on, but all my animals are safe, and I am used to such a situation that I consider it a normal life now. My friend, whose ancestors are Ainu, came over again. This time, he was staying over because he had missed his last bus, which only comes 3 times a day. Koji-san, do you want something warm to drink? It's cool tonight. I offer my friend some hot drinks. Thanks, Ryu-san. I will have some hot wine with you. You're good at making those. I nodded and headed back to the kitchen and opened up a cheap Japanese wine in a paper packet. I opened a can of Brazilian corn snack and offered it to my friend, who had never had these before. Ryu-san, I can't even read what these are. Don't worry, you won't die, I joked as I went back to heat up the wine and frozen mixed berries. We had a long chat that night. I remember we were talking about the similarities of my grandmother's tribe and what he learned from his grandparents, who were some of the last speakers of the Ainu language. All of a sudden, it became quite windy outside, and I needed to close our terrace door, which leads to the back. I used to leave it open during warmer days, but now it's very cold, so I kept it closed. I don't know if it was because of the alcohol, but the both of us suddenly felt a drop in temperature. My friend has a keychain with a small device called Bakatan, which claims to send spirits around it. It's kind of like a toy crystal, so I felt a little iffy. But that device that my friend had suddenly sparked with red light. Hey, Ryu-san, I think the phenomenon that you always told me about is going to happen. He explains that the device will spark in red when there are unknown spirits. It'll be in blue if it is a calm spirit, and in green if the place has no spirits at all. Did you come over to test your toy? I asked. He suddenly took out his phone and began to play what I think is a traditional tribal prayer, maybe recorded during a ceremony or something. I could hear drumming and several men chanting in a strong vocal tone. Koji-san, what exactly is going on? You will not hear the chanting inside the house, you know. He nodded and muted the music and pointed his finger at the backyard and did a hush sign. Suddenly, we heard what sounded like chanting right outside the backyard. I was surprised because he seemed so used to a situation like that. I thought he was playing a trick on me. But then there was a sudden breezy feeling, and I thought I felt something touch me on my left arm very lightly and went away with a light wind. Is it gone? I asked, trying to understand what was going on. My friend took out the device, and it sparked in blue at first, then became green. Wow, I wish I could record that on my phone. This is the first time I experienced such phenomena. He told me in a very excited attitude. I gave him a really look. What do you guys think of my friend's spirit checking device and the light emitting from it? Do you believe that it works? Or are you a skeptic like me?